What is up, fellow viewers? All right, hope you're having a nice day. If there's any composite laminators or trimmers watching, I am sending my regards. I hope you all doing well. Now, this is a quick little video which I wanted to make. I've literally just finished making another video. And by the way, for all those who do not know, I am a Formula 1 composite laminator, carbon fiber laminator. You can call it whatever you want. There's so many different names for it, but I'm just going to say composite laminator because carbon isn't the only resin infused fiber that you get to work with as a composite laminator. There's plenty of other ones, believe it or not, like Kevlar, etc., glass, whatever. Anyway, so in this video, we're going to talk about the stakes of making pads for a Formula 1 team out of carbon fiber and the tolerances involved and how easy, essentially, it is to scrap a pad in a Formula 1 team. When you laminate for a Formula 1 team as a contractor, as a permanent employee, it doesn't really matter. It's all the same thing. If you can hear in the background noise, there's two boys just having a hell of a lot of fun out here on these fields on their little dirt bikes. And I've tell you what, I've never been sat on a bike ever, but recently I've been getting really interested in it. And just seeing these boys riding around these fields on these little dirt bikes, it just really makes me want to hop on one and just give it a go. Do you know what I mean? Even though I've never been sat on one, and it probably would end quite badly if I just did right now. Now, first of all, let's talk about the differences that I've noticed, right? So, number one, you've obviously got your quality assurance, you've got your quality, you've got your inspection. After the pads have been created and they've gone through, eye level check when they've been just looked over by an inspector with their eyes, etc., they usually go through a laser scan. And very often they actually go through NDT, non-destructive testing scans as well, to make sure that these pads are up to par and that they are not going to be breakable, and they're not going to be brittle, and they're not going to snap very easily, and that they are up to the structural standards of Formula 1, essentially. By the way, I'm getting attacked by bugs left, right, and centre. A hell of a lot. So the tolerances that I've talked about are a lot smaller and a lot narrower, and the room for error is a lot smaller in Formula 1 compared to other industries when it comes to putting things like metal inserts or aluminium inserts into your whatever part you're laminating, or essentially inputting carbon inserts and roller cells and things like that. There's a hell of a lot more room for error allowed when you work on things like road car, as long as obviously you don't compromise on the visual looks, because when you work on road car pads in the road car industry, or if you work in aerospace stuff, oftentimes they do care about the visuals a little bit more. But when it comes to stuff like hard pads, etc., often cases it's something that you can add afterwards, and it's something that you can essentially fix afterwards by just gluing some bunch of bits on, etc. When it comes to Formula 1, this isn't something you can do, because oftentimes when you missed out a step, or you're a few millimeters off to where you shouldn't be, or you're missing an insert, a pad which has been worked on for, by multiple people over various different shifts for could be even up to a week, could very easily get scrapped. And not only is that a hell of a lot of money, time, efficiency wasted that was involved in making this pad, but it's just a shame, isn't it? It's energy wasted. Now, one thing which I have actually noticed massively, when it comes to, for example, working for supplier companies or any third-party composite or carbon fiber companies, you're missing things like specialized tools, like your lasers, essentially, your lasers which point at the mold and show you exactly where you need to put down your hard pads or extra patches, or even your ply of material on every single one of the plies. It makes the job a lot easier, and especially when it comes to having your material, your ply, put down exactly where you need to have it on the line that the laser has pointed down. It's a lot more accurate than if you were doing it by eye, basically. And you'd be surprised by how much measuring is also involved in this. That's one thing which I've noticed a huge difference in when it comes to stuff like road cars. For example, if you're doing a door skin panel, or if you're doing a roof, etc., if you're doing a door card or a roof or a rear clam for some of these supercars, essentially, you're not required as much to do a lot of measuring, because a lot of these plies go down in one big piece, like for a door panel. Basically, it all goes down in one big piece, and then usually gets just a couple of reinforcements around the edges or whatever. When it comes to Formula 1, when it comes to Formula 1, you can spend I don't know, you can spend 8-10 hours just doing one single tedious job in order to make sure that it's done perfectly and it's done properly, and it's not going to you're not going to sacrifice the pad. So the work involved in Formula One, as I've already mentioned, is a lot more in depth in terms of measurements. I mean, you could spend hours just going over and over and over one piece, because you're staggering plies of carbon, and the way they're staggering, there are a few mils off to each side every single stagger, but you have to make sure you measure every single one and you don't just eye it sometimes, because you could very easily make a mistake, and that mistake could be quite costly, obviously, as you can imagine, the stakes in Formula One. And not the food. I could do with the food right now, I can't lie. And I'm not talking about the fucking steak Formula One team either. Do you know what I mean? Stupid joke. The other thing which I also have noticed is obviously you've got budget cabs, and it is something that is talked about and people are aware of in Formula One, believe it or not. However, when it comes to the materials being wasted, when it comes to the resources being wasted, obviously Formula One teams are a lot more loose with that sort of stuff than you do have with other supply companies, for obvious reasons. You know what I mean? Formula One teams are multi-billion-pound corporations, whereas when it comes to these little supply companies, which is something that I've been saying for a while, unfortunately, I think in the industry over the years, so many companies have been popping up trying to undercut one another, in either promising these bigger corporations who subcontract it over to these smaller companies that they can either do it quicker or they can do it better quality or cheaper. And the problem is, so many of these companies try and undercut one another, they get to a point where so little profit is being made from these pads. So obviously wastefulness is a lot more frowned upon, not just frowned upon, but even as a laminator doing a contract, for example, for a smaller company, you're more aware of the fact that you're trying to be as good as you possibly can in terms of wastefulness, etc. And not that you're not trying to do that in Formula One, but you're just more aware of where your priorities lie. Obviously, the type of carbon involved in Formula One is a little bit different in terms of the grade of material than you would have in other industries as well. When it comes to, like I said, road cars, there's a particular contract which I did in, I'd say in Czech Republic last year. And a lot of the stuff that we worked on was slightly cheaper grade carbon fiber that was more aimed for visual herringbone jobs that look as best as possible, while still being, don't get me wrong, an expensive material, and much higher grade than something that you would order online if you were just doing a little home DIY job out of carbon, which you, by the way, can. And let me know if you'd want to see a video of me doing some wet laying, essentially, because that's something you can do. Or if you would like to see a video, perhaps, on if and how Formula One pads, Formula One carbon pads are repaired, because there are such things as wet lay repairs and things like that, even on a track where Formula One teams have staff over on the track in case, I don't know, a chassis gets damaged, and they'll essentially sand it down and apply resin and repatch it with a dry piece of carbon and wet lay over it. But that's for another video. Let me know if you would like to see that sort of content. And often cases, obviously, because of these high tolerances, when a pad does get scrapped in Formula One, it's a hell of a lot different than when a pad gets scrapped in another industry, where it might mean a hell of a lot more because of the amount of people working on it and the amount of times that it takes to create each pad, but also because, as I've already just mentioned, because of the cost and the stakes in it. A Formula One team would be much happier scrapping a pad if it means that the pad is the driver, and the future pad is going to be structurally stronger and it's going to be safer. They'd much rather do that than have than risking a pad breaking or not being good enough on track, essentially, or not performing good enough. Because as you can imagine, in Formula One, even when it comes to weight, every single gram counts, right? So even when you're trying to build a chassis or a floor for a car and you're slapping on a hell of a lot of carbon where it shouldn't be, or packing out areas and things that you shouldn't be, then you're adding weight onto it. You've got to think about that. That's another thing that you're going to have in the back of your mind, right? When you're laminating these F1 pads, you think about the weight as well and saving every possible gram you can, whilst obviously not sacrificing the structural rigidity of the pad, which isn't something that you have to really think about too hard when it comes to road cars or visual pads, essentially, because again, as the name gives away, it's visual, and the visuality matters a lot more in those pads. Obviously, the use of correct, specific materials as well. In Formula One, a hell of a lot more materials are involved than there are in most road car or other productions, other specific productions, because one pad could have a material or carbon, for example, or even inserts and things like that from many different one, for example, pad could have many different types of material, types of carbon, types of whatever that goes into that pad, essentially. When it comes to doing like a rear clam for a car like an Aston Martin Valkyrie, there's a lot less involved in it, and there's a lot less of different materials involved in it, and a lot more of the same exact type of carbon that you're laying down than there is in a much smaller pad in Formula One, for example. So it's extremely important that you are like very tedious about your work, and you do really triple read through every single measurement before actually cutting. Do you know what I mean? Like measure 3 times, cut once, sort of thing, because it's very easy to make mistakes there. And yeah, just get even so, like even if you're confident about it, sometimes you can get other people to triple check your measurement or whatever, just to double check, make sure that is right, so you don't have to go through the pain and the hassle of having to scrap a part that you've already spent hours and hours and hours on. Do you know what I mean? Because even though in most cases it's not like the teams don't care, but they can move past it quite quickly, but you're bothered. You're like, fuck's sake. Do you know what I mean? It's not ideal in those terms. So reading through the manuals, reading through the virtual manuals, getting all the measurements as best as you can, with the best possible tools that you can, is extremely important. Do you know what I mean? Don't skip any steps. Don't try and shortcut anywhere. I know that in the industry, oftentimes, especially when it comes to suppliers, there are things you can do to save time. There are things you can cut corners to save cost. It's always possible, and you can probably do that in Formula One as well, but yeah, the results wouldn't be as favourable as there would be in other uses of carbon fibre, and it's probably not something you want to do. Do you know what I mean? You're risking way too much. The stakes are high, mate. Obviously, hope you've enjoyed this video, and I hope you got some sort of interesting information out of it from someone who works behind the scenes, someone who works from within the industry. Look, obviously, there's only a certain amount that I can share with you, certain amount of stuff that I can tell you. I can't tell you everything for obvious reasons because of the security from within the sport. But hopefully, the amount of stuff that I can tell you has some sort of positive contribution when it comes to banter or information to you, or I don't know, something like that. So let me know in the comments if you've got something from this video, if you learned anything interesting, or if you want to add anything. And yeah, let me know what you thought of the race at the weekend. I'll be very interested to know your opinions on that. So thank you very much for watching. I'm getting attacked all over the place, left, right and centre here. I have been the whole evening walking around here. I'm not sure what. Anyway, if you have enjoyed, like the video. You can leave a subscribe, like I said, but I'm much more interested in seeing your comments and your opinions down below. So have a lovely day, and I'm going to leave you with this nice view of this field right here. So enjoy yourself, enjoy the sun, which is currently absent, but it will probably come back eventually. And I'll see you in a bit.